This is the DRS train.
So it's taken a couple of years, but it looks like Massa's lawsuit regarding 2008 is set to go ahead soon and go to court. This one's interesting because everyone's kind of laughed it off and dismissed it, the idea that you could, challenge and win a title in the courtroom like that. But it probably won't happen, but let's just entertain the thought that it does. And now Massa is suddenly champion in 2008, 17 years after the fact. Well, obviously, that's a quite significant change to the history books. That would make a lot of Hamilton fans very unhappy. I suppose it does also set a very bad precedent because that opens up opportunity for other drivers to do the same, wouldn't it?
Yes, it would. What a disaster that would be, but it looks like it's more likely than we thought. I mean, the fact that this is actually going ahead is incredible. I would have thought that by now somebody would have thrown this out and told Massa to smarten up. But give credit to the little Brazilian. He's going forward with it, and there's every chance now that maybe it's not the most likely option, but it could happen. So if it happens, like you said, this opens a can of worms. And just to sum up what's going on here, Massa still claims that had the FIA investigated the results of Singapore 2008 at the time, that race could have been annulled entirely. And so his legal team is claiming that he is the rightful champion because if you annul those results, Massa wins the title. And that the fact that the FIA and FOM didn't intervene cost him tens of millions in earnings and sponsorships because he would have had the title of world champion. And so he could basically get a championship plus 200 million in payout if the FIA is proven to have manipulated the results. And the problem here, Peter, is that Bernie Ecclestone, who was the chief of F1, has a stupid quote that he said, where he said, Felipe Massa was cheated out of the title he deserved. That's a bit scary. I mean, that really gives Massa's team a much better case than people realize. And I personally don't think he deserved that title, but that's irrelevant. Let's just assume that he wins it. To me, it would symbolize basically the failure of governance in F1. And I honestly think we're going to see immediately many other drivers starting to sue. Not to mention Hamilton will definitely appeal that. But it would just be horrible. I mean, we could think of so many other championships that suddenly would have potential lawsuits. I mean, you could name so many, 94 being one right off the bat. I mean, Peter, what do you think the reaction to Massa winning would be, first of all? Do you think fans would be happy about that? And then do you think that other people will start to sue like immediately to get results that they think were not justly attained in the past?
It would be a very strange reaction because it's like, also because it's just like a settled issue. Because Massa has obviously his own fan base in Brazil, but then he's been out of Formula One for 8 years now. And this is a title that happened nearly 20 years ago. So like the moment has gone. I mean, the thing that really gave him his chance, I suppose, to launch this was the fact that Bernie gave away that he and Max Mosley actually knew what had happened at the time, rather than when everyone else found out the following year when PK revealed it all. And so that, I think that's what's given him his justification, is like, okay, well, if he knew what was going on, then there is grounds to do a lawsuit because he was trying to effectively covering it up for almost a year by that point. I feel like for some people, I suppose in Britain, most people wouldn't accept it, or they would just ignore it, I think. And so, well, in my eyes, it's still Lewis, and it's been that way for however many years, 17, 18 years that he's been the title winner from that year. But yes, there are others you could say, like 94 is a really obvious one that you could do. And the issue with that is Schumacher is in no position to fight that in court as well. 89 and 90 you could point fingers at for Senna and Prost. They could take they could very easily take ones or Senna's estate, shall we say, could take one off Prost, and then Prost could take one off Senna. Even everyone involved is dead now, but you could even argue 1964 possibly because of team orders in the last race to give it to Surtees was a bit fishy. Yeah,
Yep.
there's ones here and there that you could do this with. This one is very egregious because it's an obvious case of cheating, whereas the others there's always leeway to say that this wasn't meant to happen the way it did or whatever.
Outrageous and scary to think about. You're right. All those are contenders, as well as any year that people think a team cheated and they got away with it in general, right? I
Hmm.
mean, somebody could say that, well, I think that, Ferrari cheated in 2003 when Michael got a push from the marshals at Nürburgring in a dangerous position. What's to stop McLaren from suing based on a
And
singular incident
got the tire compounds changed as well
and got the
in their
tire con?
favor. And even like
Exactly.
Brabham in was it 81 or 82 when they had that hydro pneumatic suspension as well, which was illegal and everyone knew it because Tyrrell, they got disqualified for the whole of 84 for their fuel thing, whereas Brabham got away with theirs a few years earlier. Someone else had something illegal. I mean, Ferrari tried the double rear wing, but that got banned after one race in 82. There were
Yeah.
all these random examples of people finding little loopholes and exploits in the rules like that.
Yeah, that was bringing back memories there. I think that was in 1981 when Gordon Murray tried to overcome the skirtless car rule. So they built that hydro pneumatic suspension.
Mm.
That could be, and also that year, doesn't Reutemann's family claim that Eccleston tampered with the physio, which hurt Reutemann's back before the race or something?
Caesar's Palace, yeah.
Something like that. Reutemann's family came out and said that Eccleston was, and then Eccleston admitted that he did that to help Piquet.
Mm.
So, I mean, Bernie's just got a track record of exposing himself here, but
Yeah. There's also 99. I mean, it doesn't affect the drivers, but the constructors' title when it comes to Ferrari,
yeah.
those interesting barge boards of theirs, that would be one you could throw in.
Oh, yeah, easily someone could sue for that. And it leads me to my next point here. I mean, I'd like to point out that this hearing is going to take place in the High Court of Justice in London. Hopefully, the judge is a bit of a Lewis Hamilton fan. But in all seriousness, I question whether this is a scenario that maybe Massa has a point on paper, but the damage that would be done by granting him this title would irreparably damage the sport, in my opinion. This would open up a can of worms that would be impossible to close. And I honestly would think there'd be better sense and judgment. Because you could argue that only Fernando Alonso should lose his victory in Singapore. You really could argue that. And I think
Mm.
that's what
But
I would be trying.
Massa's not going to argue that because that just increases Lewis's points lead over him.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Because what would happen is that Nico Rosberg would win his first race. Uh,
Yeah, he'd gain a win.
he'd get a
Um,
win, and Hamilton would finish second.
yeah, I mean,
So
Rosberg, he kind of jokes about it now, but he's kind of because afterwards he was like, "Oh well, you cost me my first win." But then he was in. But then it just set up that safety car completely changed the way that race was running because I think Rosberg, him and I think Barrichello had to pit to run. They got penalised because they had to pit before they ran out of fuel, and that we had this absolutely nuts rule where you couldn't pit under the safety car for like the first 2 laps or something stupid like that, which they used to do at the time, while knowing that people were running as little fuel as possible. But that's the thing. You end up punishing everyone else. I mean, I imagine most of them are over it now. There's no one left except Alonso, who's still on the grid. The others are all long gone from Formula One. Well, and Lewis, of course. But you're taking those results off everyone else. So the only fair, if you were going to do any kind of punishment, the only fair way would be to disqualify Alonso, really.
and I think that's where, it's going to be frustrating if they do rule in favor of Massa, because honestly, I don't see why Rosberg, Hamilton, Heidfeld, Vettel, Glock, Coulthard, Nakajima, Button, Kovalainen should all be penalized because Alonso and Renault cheated. So I don't really understand. Well, okay, it's not proven that Fernando knew, so I'll just say Flavio cheated. But I think we all know that something like that is hard to hide from the driver.
Yeah, it's also you have to factor in the sort of butterfly effect, if you will, of stuff that happens after the safety car. Of how much of that can you blame directly on it, such as Massa exiting his pit box early and then
Yeah,
fucking his own race up. Because if he hadn't done that, he probably would have won the race, and nobody would be complaining
but didn't he
because he would have
spin
won.
before that as well? Like, didn't he hit the wall because he had a half spin in the middle of the race? So
Maybe that was before the safety car, though. If it was, because in the beginning, wasn't it like the first stint? Kimmy was like chasing him and Lewis down quite hard or something. Um,
no, this was after the safety car.
right.
So what happened was
But then
Massa
again, he
was
was yeah after the safety car, but then he'd already had his bad pit stop by then as well.
he did, but then he spun at turn 18 and tapped the tire wall without sustaining much damage.
Hmm.
So I mean, Massa finished in 13th, but he made unforced errors in that race as well. That's what people forget. It's not just that,
Hmm.
yeah, he had the pit lane incident and he also spun in the race and hit the wall himself.
Yeah.
Um,
Before the race, he was 1 point behind Lewis. I mean, the thing is, in terms of counter suing, Lewis could probably attempt this with Spa because of that insane penalty he got that seemed designed only to put him behind Massa.
yeah.
As well. That's the thing.
Dominic,
He and if he countersues and gets that, then he wins the title again.
yeah, I mean, Domenicali said the reason for Massa's incident was not the electronic signaling system, but a human error.
I mean,
So,
that wasn't the only time they'd had problems. That their electric signal thing was always bullshit, but also him probably leaving too soon. I don't know, but it's just little. It's annoying because there's little examples like that about that's why we got rid of refueling or whatever, and it's like maybe just don't try and rush quite so much. Like refueling actually sort of it almost reduced chances of accidents because everyone knew everything was going to happen slow. Whereas now it's like, oh, I have to try and get a sub 2 second pit stop. But
yeah,
back then it's like, okay, tires, we don't need to rush because we've got 7 or 8 seconds to get this done while they're refueling. And like, okay, the only bad accident we had was Jos Verstappen, but even then, like, no one died or even got injured in that, and that was because they were using some dodgy illegal fuel hose, whatever.
oh yeah, that was yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, that's all been mitigated now.
Mm.
But then if so, let's say Massa wins it, he becomes a world champion. What else could happen? I mean, what else would change from this? I mean, obviously Massa is not racing anymore, but could other teams just look at using the law and lawsuits to attain other things? Like if somebody can change the results of a championship after the
Mm.
fact so many years, it just scares me about what else is possible here.
Well, I mean, the elephant in the room is 2021. Lewis might attempt it. Then he's like, well, if I'm going to lose one championship, I'll try and gain another one and go after the FIA
Do,
for Abu
do you?
Dhabi.
I'm going to interrupt you. Do you think Lewis would be vindictive if he lost his 2008 title? Do you think he would say, "No, I want my title back"? And would he try and go after the title in 2021? Or do you think he'd try and get his '08 title back?
Well, I think he would be vindictive because I mean, half the reason he's joined Ferrari is to try and get the eighth, and he can't get the eighth if he doesn't have the seventh. So, yeah, he would see even if he himself doesn't personally see it, people around him would see an obvious opportunity to countersue for 2021 to gain that title instead if he loses 2008. Um,
Wow.
and which yes he could do, but the thing is it's not as easy as people think because there is a rule in the rule book that gives the race director basically they can override effectively any rule they want. So that gives grounds for Massey to say, oh, we could have done this with the safety car or whatnot. And even then, Massa could probably not Massa. Verstappen could probably even look at, say, Silverstone and be like, well, no, that's that. You gave him a 10-second penalty for putting me in the wall at 200 miles an hour and whatnot, and he went on to win the race. That he could then, well, so but I want a disqualification. for that, which again takes the title off Lewis.
Yeah, that would be. I don't even want to think about what the fan reaction would be if Hamilton announced a lawsuit to take back 2021 and won that.
Mm.
I genuinely think it could get violent between fan bases in
Yeah,
this.
it would just everyone would start doing it everywhere because the other titles there aren't really many others he could claim legal grounds on. Like 2016, it's the Malaysia engine failure. Uh,
07
07. Okay, well
because
him
of
and
the fuel thing that happened is suspicious. The I shouldn't even be saying this because this I don't want this to happen, but I remember after Brazil there was some massive fuel irregularities between the Williams drivers and the BMW Saubers.
yes, and
And
they
so
that
and then they
that
said we don't want to end the championship like this, but actually in any other race those cars would have been thrown out, I think. What do you
I
think?
think when it comes to 2007, he's definitely over that because he's implied in the past that he knows there was something fishy going on because people have asked him about this and because the last couple of races of 2007 just everything collapsed and it looked very suspect. I think the quote he said was, "I didn't know then, but I do know now. It's not something I can talk about." So maybe not while he's at Ferrari, but maybe once he's retired, he might spill the tea and explain, and he's no longer formally connected to McLaren or Mercedes anymore.
Yeah.
It depends if he wants to just burn bridges with them. But the thing is, because that even to me that does look suspect because there was the really weird strategies they were pulling on him in China, and then he goes and gets stuck in the gravel trap. Um, and then that I think the explanation for the gearbox in Brazil was there was a tiny little bit of debris that got caught in one of the hydraulic valves, and then it just flooded its way through, and then suddenly everything fired up again. Um, and
Okay.
he ends up 1 point away from taking the title. And this is all connected in with Spygate as to that it makes it look fishy. Um, even though you can still throw, oh well, he was the one that put it in the gravel trap, and Alonso he threw his title by crashing in Fuji. Yeah,
Yeah.
but then also Europe that year because he had his own case of being picked up and put back on the track by the crane, and that's like
Yeah, that's
that is like
illegal.
that even though he didn't score any points in that race, that's a disqualification anywhere else because that's outside assistance. So he should have
Exactly.
been he should have been disqualified. Not that it would have made any difference in the long run. Um, so he could. I mean, 2010 he was a contender in the final race, but anything that happened, it was either reliability or him himself fucking up because he had crashes in Singapore, Australia, and Monza, just off the top of my head. So
Yeah.
that's on him. And the other seasons, he wasn't really. There weren't any others where he was in the fight and lost. Really,
Well, yeah, you're right. 2012, he really has no argument there.
it's reliability and his own errors. He
Yeah,
wasn't.
it's
He was
hilarious.
knocked out a few races early of the
I don't think you
fight.
can. That's going to be a tough one.
13, no one was in the fight except Vettel that year, and then the other seasons are all ones he won. And then 22 onwards, the cars. Yeah, he's not
Yeah,
fighting good.
16. I don't think he has an argument for 16 either. So, yeah,
Yeah.
I think ultimately, if I'm Kimi Räikkönen and Max Verstappen, I'm prepping my legal team.
Mm.
I'm seriously because I
Yeah.
think Lewis might come after one of those two as vengeance if he can't get his '08 back. And if I'm
Yeah.
Kimi and I have Max, I have my lawyers ready. Just like what you said with Kimi, say, well, you cheated in Nürburgring, Lewis, and your team cheated the whole year. How do we know that? Why were you, if I'm Kimi's lawyer, this is what I say.
Mm.
Why were you and Fernando allowed to keep your points when your team was found to be cheating? In any other scenario, that should have meant your entire team gets its points stripped, including the
Yeah,
drivers.
that was Hungary, wasn't it, where they would have the points taken off?
Exactly.
Yeah, and so that's a
It-
whole that's a win and a third place then gone, isn't it? I think.
It's precisely right.
Mm.
Kimi better not be saying something like, "Oh, I don't really care. It makes no difference to me." I mean, that would be just like the most disgraceful thing. He better get his lawyers ready. And Max has a harder case in many ways because I do think what happened in the final race was odd, but he can point to the regulations and say that the racing director has discretion and that you can't prove anything suspicious went on, even if it was a bit odd.
Yeah,
So I would just point to things and be ready for Lewis because I agree with you. I don't think Lewis will take this quietly. If he
yeah,
gets his 2008 stripped, he will first try to get '08 back. If that fails, he will go after Kimi or Max, and they need to be ready
Mm.
because it's coming, and everyone else needs to be ready too. And here's my other question, Peter, before you answer, add on to what I just rambled on about. Who do you like? Who's going to pay Massa this 200 million payout in lost sponsorship if he wins?
Well,
Is Alpine going to pay some of that because they're technically Endstone?
I mean,
Like,
wouldn't it be the FIA because that's basically the lost prize money for winning the title or something?
but Renault cheated, and Endstone is the team.
Mm. And it's like even they could even say, well, there's still a formal connection because the Flav is back. So it's like, oh well, he's here. Without him, you could be like, well, there's no one left from that time that's still here. So it's not.
Ooh,
It's the same team, but in name. Well, not even in name only, in factory only, or whatever. Um, yeah, you can't get it out of Alonso because well, this is another thing: is that how much did Alonso know? He's always going to deny he knew anything, but even he must have thought, well, this he must have been privy to some kind of discussions or thought something's up that weekend, just with the vibe in the garage. I don't know.
I just thought it was so suspicious after he won that race. He started joking around about the strategy in the debrief room, and Flavio looks so nervous, as in like stop talking, reaction to him. I mean, Nick Heidfeld said it best after the race. He said he immediately said something suspicious is going on here.
Mm.
Quick Nick was quick thinking that day, and if
Yeah.
the FIA was a bit more like that, maybe they would have pointed that out. It was absurd.
Martin Brundle was onto it as well. I think it was when the safety car was ongoing. He was like, "Oh, it seemed a bit interesting that PK crashes and then his teammate's suddenly in the lead from 14th on the grid." Like he
Absolutely.
even saw something. It's actually it's amazing how obvious it is actually now when you look at it. Because this is back because Alonso was the first person to pit, so he'd already done his pit stop. But this is back when pitting under the safety car often wasn't worth it, but because of that rule that you have to wait 2 laps and then you can all pit or something. Whereas these days you'd be like, well, no, that doesn't benefit him at all, but that's because we don't have refueling and the rules are different. But back then it did actually, like, strategies were really complicated back then compared to today. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
One of the many reasons we need to bring back more strategic variation. Although
Yeah.
yeah.
I mean, that's a topic for a different episode, but there's all that stuff needs to be fixed as well. But in each of these cases, as I said before, you can get counter lawsuits in place because Max can claim probably Silverstone and probably wouldn't surprise anywhere else. I mean, I don't know. He could even try and claim that, say, Hungary was set up because of what Bottas did. Is that Bottas goes through and takes out all of Hamilton's main rivals, and then not Lewis, and then Lewis goes and blows it himself at the restart. But
You could.
yeah, and then 2008, as I said, Hamilton could probably he could go after Spa and say, well, I was penalised for something that wasn't illegal when I did it. And so, yeah, they
Yeah.
changed the rule after the race and they gave me an enormous penalty that very conveniently puts me behind Massa. And yeah, we said '07. In each case there is there it doesn't end there. You could get very very nitpicky. Even as I mentioned, going a bit further back with Senna and Prost in '89 and '90, there were probably examples from other races that year because I found with those seasons everyone talks about Japan in boat, but I know hardly anything about any other races that happened that year. And you could, yeah.
There are other races that you could argue, but Japan is obviously the big one. I mean, it was ridiculous. If you think about it, Senna's family will be ready to sue because
Mm,
they still to this day think that was a ridiculous decision. That because Senna backed up and went onto the circuit, not going through the escape road, that he got penalized. And
mm.
if you think about that, that is a ridiculous rule, right? I mean, that is just absurd that you threw a guy out of the race because he didn't go through like the little maze and just
Yeah, I mean, well,
re-enter.
PK famously points that out, doesn't he, in the press in the drivers' brief in the next years that you then have to go, you're reversing onto the racing line if you to go
Yeah.
back. Um, I'm trying to think. I'll just look up if he got reinstated, if that would give him the championship. It still wouldn't give him the championship, like even if it was because the problem is then that because both of them retired in Australia. If it was the last race of the season, you could maybe argue something, but even then, it doesn't.
But it was the best results, wasn't it? The best six,
Yeah,
or
but
whatever it
in
was.
both cases, none of them lost points because they all had back then. Cars broke down, so they didn't have.
Interesting.
Um, does it
I'm not
say?
sure.
Oh no, all results were counted in '89.
Oh, they were. Okay.
But wait, no. Oh
Let
no
me
no
see.
no 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 no. Best 11 results for the drivers.
Okay.
So okay, Senna one,
So,
two, three, four, five, six. He scored points on 7 occasions, so he'd gain another 9 points. So he'd be 7 points behind Prost. One, two, three. Yeah, yeah. So no, he'd still lose the title. So that's yeah, it's done. The only way you could say as well, oh, maybe Australia would have gone differently, but that one, I think he crashed from the lead, or so, but.
well, okay, so he'd have an extra 9 points in Japan, right? So if he has an extra 9 points, he has 69 points, right? Let's say he wins that race.
Yeah,
Okay. So Prost has 76, and then Senna would have
and
nine.
if Senna won the next race, and Prost was like sixth or lower, he'd be champion. But
Okay.
Australia is a funny one because Prost withdrew, like at the start because he already had the championship, so he didn't need to. And I think Senna crashed from the lead.
Oh, that's very impressive, actually, because they make it sound like if that crazy decision wasn't made, that Senna would have won the title. You're right.
Mm.
You're right.
All it would have
How-
done, I think people forget that was the penultimate round. All it would have done is meant that he was still in contention in Australia. In which case, that would have
Yeah.
been very different because then, well, Prost would have raced it, and who knows how that would have gone. Um, I don't know if there are any other races from that season that they might say if something dodgy happened
I don't think
because
so.
Canada. I mean, only Prost only had one retirement. Senna had a lot more. Yeah. Um.
I mean, at the end of the day, the other championship that was a bit suspicious was when Senna crashed into Prost in 1990 at the start when Prost was at Ferrari.
Yeah.
That's something Alain can easily sue for.
But the problem
And
with that is that he can't get the championship because if they sue and invalidate that result, that has no effect on them. That's the issue for him.
yeah,
He could
I,
get some kind of maybe financial compensation if he still desires it, but there's no because he was already behind by quite a lot actually as well.
yeah, you're
He
right.
was, yeah, he was 11 points behind.
He has to somehow argue that he would have won that race, and that's going to be impossible to do if
Yeah,
you
yeah,
don't.
because you can't. I mean, these days you could at least argue, well, the car's probably not going to break down, whereas back then it's like, well, who knows? It very easily could. And
Interesting.
yeah, there's no with those ones. I don't think you could do anything with that.
I I think I think Hill has a good argument for 94. To be honest, he could
Yeah,
get away with that. Uh,
um, he would need. Well, again, neither of them finished that race, and Schumacher still won it, which means that Schumacher was ahead still going into the final round. So again, you invalidate the result; it makes no difference. Um, and Schumacher had already, been disqualified from 2 races and banned from 2 others.
well, what he would be arguing is what happened to Michael in '97. That the fact that he premeditated in a
Oh, I see.
premeditated manner,
Yes,
he should be thrown out of the championship altogether.
you could do that. Well, then 89, 1990 even. You could do that. That's what Prost would do with Senna, get him
good
excluded.
point.
And
Exactly.
I,
Exactly. That,
I feel like of all of them, that would generate the most hostile reaction because Senna is dead and can't like fight this or challenge it. To kind of posthumously lose a title like that. Um,
you know what? If Massa wins, I think they're all going to do it. I really do. These drivers are competitive, even in their retirement, and
yeah.
I don't see them just sitting there thinking, I could get 2 more championships sitting on my couch.
Hmm.
Of course they want to do that. And
Not yeah.
yeah,
Not 1986. Is there anything in there that Nigel or Nelson could try other than
uh,
for Goodyear or whoever the tire supplier was to not have blow my tires out?
I mean, they can somehow say that McLaren were cheating or that the tires were unsafe.
Because PK only lost it because they made him do a precautionary pit stop because
Yeah,
they thought he might have the blowout.
I mean, PK had to sue his own team or Goodyear or the whatever, not Goodyear, whatever was it Goodyear, the tire
I
manufacturer?
don't know. Goodyear
Um,
wasn't Pirelli. I think it was
yeah,
Goodyear in the 80s mostly.
yeah.
Um,
I think it was also Goodyear. Like Williams had Goodyears, but then some cars had Pirellis. So
hmm,
McLaren, both McLaren and Williams had Goodyear tires.
mhm.
Okay, so yeah, I would find PK would have to sue his own team and be like, "Yeah, they sabotaged me by pitting." Like
Yeah,
that'd make him popular. So,
it's just an explosion of Brazilian championships going back and forth.
exactly.
Now, one gains one, one loses one. Another one. I mean, this is something. Maybe if he was still alive, you wonder if Sterling Moss would try and counter sue himself for 1958 and try and get the disqualification put back in place in Portugal for Hawthorn and finally become a champion.
Maybe his family could do that on his behalf.
Yes,
I'm sure.
nearly 70 years later, why not? You know.
Absolutely. I
Um,
mean, Moss has a good argument for that too, by the way. That's not that far fetched. That's what scares me
yeah,
about this. It could if
and again,
Massa
it's.
wins this,
I mean, and also to be fair, these days Moss has a lot more fans than Mike Hawthorn does, and I mean, Mike Hawthorn's been dead for 64 years, 65 years, or something. Um, I think some people would like that, but even so, they'd be like, well, no, this is not right. I mean, it would be so strange because that not only is a very long time ago, but everyone involved is dead. There's nobody like Bernie Ecclestone was alive then, and he'd entered one race that year, but he wasn't in a position of power of any kind at the
no, it
time.
wasn't.
Um, you can't. There's nobody left that's still alive, and old like Enzo, he's long gone. Yeah,
I
and
mean, it's just yeah. Oh.
I mean, I mentioned about 64 regarding team orders and that because we seem to go back and forth all the time with the legality of team orders and whatnot. And so that one's you could well, I don't know who would, but that would be was it Gurney who lost it then or gave up the
A-
lead
And would Gurney,
for
yeah, I
for
think it was
Surtees? Who was the other
yes.
one? There was three of them involved.
Um, let me see. Was this in '64?
Yeah, Mexico. On
Um,
the last lap, what's his face? He slows down by like 30 seconds
no,
to
no,
let Surtees through.
Bondini, right?
Oh, Lorenzo Bandini, yeah.
Yeah. So it was Bondini and Cersei's. Yeah, I mean these guys all have a strong case. But then
Yeah.
individual races will also be thrown into the, I mean 64 also Sterling Moss's year. These are all good ones. But then think about somebody like Rubens Barrichello. Could he not sue Ferrari for like forcing him to do things that were illegal, like the team
Yeah.
orders? Like was that like he could
Austria 2002, that's
sue?
one.
He'd
I
say
mean,
that was one race win and sue and take that off Michael.
yeah. And then he can say, well, obviously, at the time it was sort of countered because they fucked up the photo finish in Indianapolis. But that's just on Schumacher, to be honest, messing it up slightly. And I think at the
Yeah.
time they were like, okay, well, it means we can call it even. Um, Another one is Germany 2010 because that was Ferrari got fined for that, didn't they? It's like, well, no, why not disqualify both of them? I mean, Vettel wins the title even harder then, and he finally gets his home win at Hockenheim as well.
Massa's just coming after Alonso so hard now. He's gonna take a Singapore win away from him and take
Yeah,
away Hawk.
how many wins? Yeah, if Kimi can sue for reliability, you could take like half a dozen wins off Alonso in 2005 as well. He
Yeah,
can
I
lose
mean,
that title.
you should do Mario Ilian and Ilmore and see how that goes. I don't know,
Hmm.
but it's actually you're right. Hockenheim 2010. That's what I'm saying. It's not just championships that'll come into question. It'll
Just
be
individual races because they acknowledged it was illegal and they just fined them. And it's like, well, no, if it was actually illegal, disqualify both of them because they were complicit in it. And like, it's not like you can claim ignorance on the part of Alonso for Singapore. Like they knew exactly what they were doing,
I
and they did a
totally
very
agree.
bad job of hiding it. The thing is, if they wanted no one, they should have used a more cryptic message, but also Massa should have made it look like they were battling. Like there is a way of, simulating a battle for position rather than, oh, I'll just slow down and get out of the way. So
Mm.
he could have just, I don't know, locked up on the run to the Parabolica and made it deliberately. And it's like, oh, well, now Alonso's right up my arse and he can pass me at the hairpin. Bam, it's done. And it looks very believable.
Yeah. I don't understand how some of the smartest people in the world come up with the stupidest ways of getting things done sometimes. I mean, that whole radio message
Hmm. I mean, it was
was
just it's said, and
so
yeah.
so stupid and just
Hmm.
humiliating the massa. And he could sue. He could say like, "Oh, they tried to make me do it in Australia earlier in the year, and then they harassed me in Hockenheim, and I
Hmm.
deserve." Like this could turn into a disaster. Like people could just be suing for like points that they should have won in one race that could change the championship, and Massa will gain like a championship plus a few wins. Alonso will be stripped of a few wins. This will just keep going on because Fernando Alonso will countersue.
Yeah. Go back to 2021. Hamilton could sue Williams because again, there's that suspicious message from what's his face is
Latifi,
Latifi's.
yeah.
He says it has to be this lap the overtake, and that's suddenly when he crashes the same lap in a way place that, well, I mean, Kimi had crashed there in FP1, but like a place that you don't normally crash, and he seemed very unbothered about it. I mean, because I've looked at that on my own channel as well. He
It
could
was
claim, oh well, they did that, but then why would Williams do that at the same time? They have no connection to Verstappen or loyalty to Red Bull.
you just never know. Someone may have paid them $10 million under under just to do that.
Yeah, maybe if Latifi does that, he gets to stay in 2022. I don't know.
Something ridiculous like
Because I
that.
mean, George is a was a Mercedes junior, but not Latifi. Um, just the timing was just so extremely convenient of
It
that
was.
crash.
Right, but that whole race was suspicious. I mean, I'm not a fan of either driver. I've been on record saying I don't particularly
Yeah,
like.
well, there's another one. Verstappen. Well, Hamilton didn't get a penalty for cutting the corner on the first lap as well.
Don't. Oh yeah, that. And then I just remembered another year that you could, and you won't like this because you're a fan of the driver. But remember, there was a big scandal about Vettel speeding under yellows in Brazil 2012.
Oh yeah,
I could see some Fernando Alonso hardcore fans pulling that up, and then Fernando just citing that and saying, "Well, he actually sped under yellow flags. That's my championship."
mm. Another countersuit Malaysia because this is where Checo comes out of the woodwork and says, "Oh well, I actually deliberately ran wide so that I couldn't pass him, even though I was going to." Um, that's the one everyone looks at. And it's like it looks like you're taking away a Ferrari win from the main team, like for having a customer team chase after them. And
Wait, hang on. Perez said that?
no, he didn't say that, but I'm sure he's thinking it. I mean, a lot of people are thinking it
Oh,
that
okay.
he could have won Sepang so easily, and then just randomly runs wide, and
Okay,
then just yeah.
if he was stupid enough to actually say that, that actually would be like a open goal
Yeah,
for
but
someone to
even
sue.
then, that wouldn't stand up in court because then there's probably some Latin term for like, well, you're talking about implying something that never happened was going to happen because then he has to try and reimagine a situation where he does pass him.
Right.
Because it's like, well, maybe he doesn't pass him, or maybe he crashes into him, or blah 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 blah. Um, but yeah, that would take the win off Alonso. That would take the championship back off. I think with the case of Brazil, I think it was that they dismissed it because the race was done, and they were like, "Can we just put it to bed now? We're not taking the championship away because of a yellow flag." Um,
But then think about also all these lawsuits and what the financial penalty to the FIA would be. It would bankrupt the FIA. Can you imagine if
mm,
all these drivers won their lawsuits and the FIA was held liable? They'd be bankrupted. The organization would collapse. There's no way they can pay out hundreds of millions of dollars to all these people.
yeah,
Like this is actually existential for the FIA. They can't have someone win a lawsuit like this.
It's weird because so there'd be so much course correction because if you took 1981 for example, and if they say okay, hydropneumatic suspension that's illegal, we're disqualifying your drivers and your cars from the constructors, and so suddenly everyone else in well every race that both of them finished, every other team and driver moves up 2 positions. That then affects the championship because that means that teams gain points they wouldn't have had. You then have to pay out prize money to teams, most of whom don't exist anymore, as for that as well. That's where it all gets really complicated. I mean, half the drivers, several of them are dead from that season now as well. There's all these little things that it would change.
Nick Heidfeld could sue BMW Sauber for team orders in Canada 2008. Oh, were team orders allowed at that
Mm,
time? I think they if they weren't, then he could sue for that
I don't
too.
really remember. Well, wasn't it that he was just on a really garbage strategy compared to Kubica? I mean, they did
Yeah.
give him team orders, but Kubica was not going to stay stuck behind him for another 20 laps.
Well, Nick could argue that he was. That Nick could say, "Look,
Yeah.
I've held off Fernando Alonso many times. Why wouldn't I be able to hold off Robert Kubica?"
Hmm.
With all due respect. So
Um,
what a mess.
Vettel, Canada 2019, get rid of that penalty, and he does get the win.
Oh
Doesn't
yeah,
affect the championship, but it, affects his pride. Uh,
and that's a good point you made. It would just be like all this money from the lawsuit itself, right? Like the settlement, but then also the lost prize money, which is then
hmm,
realized that needs to be paid out. There's no way
yeah,
the FIA, Peter, there's no way the FIA could sustain these payments. Like they'll collapse. Like they
hmm.
could go bankrupt immediately if 5, 6 drivers or cases went against them and the
'Cause
FIA was held liable. You're
yeah,
done.
and you mentioned the FA. Not that I know of any examples, but there are probably examples from other FIA sanctioned series where people could do the same thing. I mean, I cannot name any on the top of my head, but it wouldn't surprise me if you see stuff like this suddenly happening in MotoGP or WEC or WRC or whatever, as well.
And
All
then
the
who's the
feeder formulas. Well, feeder
yeah,
formulas. I mean, Formula Two. There's probably grounds for suing Mechachrome for a lot of drivers that you've basically ruined my life. What one engine failure stops me getting to Formula One?
oh my goodness. I got so much to say about this. I mean, someone will sue Mick Schumacher and Prema. I can
Oh
guarantee
yeah,
you.
those extremely illegal race starts. Take the championship off him. But
Oh,
then, you can't retroactively try and reimagine a world where he doesn't go to Haas and maybe Callum Hilott gets that instead or whatever.
and then it won't be long until other sports pick up on this and say, look, a Formula One driver became a world champion 18 years after the fact.
hmm,
We think we deserve the Premier League title 10 years ago. We're going to sue. What a
for something like
mess.
that, or even, I don't know, what's the one? The one that I'm still funny about: Ghana v Uruguay in the semi-finals,
Oh, yeah.
quarterfinals, the 2010 World Cup. That absolutely garbage VAR
Handball.
decision. Yeah,
Oh,
the
yeah.
handball and the V. It's like that is in. Sorry, that is a goal. Yeah, something like that. Yeah, would come up.
Italy could sue for the 2002 World Cup, so could Spain because of all the
Yeah.
bias refereeing. I mean, point is that there's so many incidents. I mean, you were naming some in F1 just there, like Vettel going off the track, that a
Mm,
bit of a strange penalty. We could literally sit here, and these are all credible legal cases.
yeah.
I mean, I
I mean,
just
we've
find like
seen it because people say it's 18 years after the fact. Was that well, Lance Armstrong lost all of his cycling titles, didn't he? 20, which is now what 20 odd years ago. So it can happen that people can get stripped of stuff a long time afterwards.
that's a good point. That's a very good point. I mean, honestly, there's so much that you could do. It would really ruin everything. It would
Mm.
make all the results subject to scrutiny and
Michael could sue McLaren for 98 or sue Coulthard maybe for taking that title
for
from him.
well, they could sue and because there's some kind of rumor that Pat Fry was purposely trying to tell David to be somewhere on the track that would cause Michael problems.
Mm.
So somebody could say, well, that's illegal. You could say that Um,
Yeah. I mean,
I
in
don't.
that case, you could disqualify. You could take their constructors' title. You couldn't strip Hakkinen of the drivers' title though, because he
No,
had nothing to do with that. But
I
yeah,
don't. I
constructors, you
don't.
could take that off them,
Yeah, I
and
don't
Ferrari
think.
gets even richer.
Yeah, exactly. Well, they would lose. Maybe they would have to pay prize money if they lose one of their titles from Lewis's lawsuit. But
Mm.
you know, for it's just like that whole thing was ridiculous. I mean, honestly, I don't even know. If I'm the FIA, like I would really be like shaking in my boots right now. Like they need to do something because that would be the end for them if this goes through. That would be the end of the FIA as we know it.
Yeah.
So
Maybe we would finally
wow,
get out that breakaway series that everyone wanted 15 years ago.
yeah,
Mm.
it would be a total mess. So let's hope that it doesn't happen. I think there's still enough grounds against it, but there's no doubt that it won't. The saga won't end here. It will spiral out of control. So in many ways, I'm really looking forward to that date more than almost any racing. It's so far into the year, but that would just be one of the most monumental sporting decisions in the history of like modern sport. There would be nothing that could potentially compare to that. And I think for the sake of Formula One, let's hope that the decision
Mm.
goes against Massa.
When is the date that it's happening again?
Good question. I believe it's in October, but I can
Quite
double
late in
check.
the season.
Yeah, I can double check it right now.
That's very close to Singapore as well.
Well, let's see. I mean, the court hearing is scheduled for October 28th to October 31st.
Okay, so that's that's the week after Mexico. So that's very late in the season.
Yeah.
7 months, well, almost 8 months away, and just in time for Interlagos. That's going to be a funny one. The thing is, again, is that Lewis is adored in Brazil now as well. So it's not that it wouldn't necessarily gain that kind of blind support that, oh, yeah, now Massa's got a title.
No, but there's just not much to say about that. I mean, if Massa really thinks anyone's going to take this guy seriously, like he's really out of his mind.
Mm.
Like it's just like you said, I would not consider it at all to be a worthy title. And I think that weekend, uh, it's going to be completely dominated by what happens in that court. Like I am not even going to be following F1 that week. All I want to hear is that Massa did not get the title because there's a very good chance that Raikkonen would lose his title, in my opinion, if this happened. I really believe that deep down. That
Mm.
if they can get this overturned, somebody's going to overturn 2007.
It does feel a bit
It's
interesting
really
to me that it's
scary.
the next race that happens after this court hearing is Brazil, though. That doesn't feel like a coincidence.
That can't be right. Is that right?
Well, you said it's October 28th to 31st, and yeah,
Oh
so
my!
that's 2 days after Mexico, and then
I,
yeah, Sao Paulo's a week and a half later.
wait, let
So
me
we
check
could
that.
come out if Massa wins this. Suddenly, Hamilton's lost a title, and the next race is Brazil, where he
That
snatched it the last minute. But the thing is,
you know,
everyone loves him now in Brazil, and he's an honorary citizen and whatnot. And Massa is not. Again, it's not. It isn't in Formula One. Hasn't been for a long time.
this is disgusting. This just feels so staged now. I'm scared. I'm sorry. I know this is a professional podcast, but that is too coincidental for my liking. That is one of the most bizarre things ever.
Mm.
It just feels like now what it feels like. First of all, that was a brilliant observation. So full credit to you. You're the one that pointed this out. So let's just let the listeners hear this. October 24th to 26th is the Mexican Grand Prix, round 20. Then Massa's court case is scheduled, the first hearing is scheduled October 28th to October 31st. Then November 7th to November 9th is the Brazilian Grand Prix, round 21.
Mm.
If you're telling me this is a coincidence, then you're telling me that, you know, horses can fly. My point is that I'm not sure where I was going with that, but My point is that this is very suspicious. Either Massa somehow made it so that he could have this hearing and then have a celebration in Brazil, or something's being planned by F1, which I don't put out of Liberty Media. Liberty Media loves the showbiz, the cinematic, the fake, almost fake feeling behind some of these results in F1.
Mm.
This is very scary that Brazil is the next race. I don't think that's a coincidence. And I actually think we're the first people to ever talk about this on a podcast. That Massa's hearing is scheduled right before the Brazilian Grand Prix. And if I'm Kimi Raikkonen's lawyer, I am preparing the defense case for 2007 right now. And the same with Max Verstappen. People listening to this will be laughing, will be saying I'm a paranoid fool. You'll see. This is really scary. Now I actually think this could happen. I really do. I'm not.
I think
I'm honest. I honestly think this could happen now. This is crazy.
I think a lot of people are ignoring it, partly because they just assume it's not going to happen, but also this has been going on for a long time because Massa first announced his decision to launch this about 2 or 3 years ago. It wasn't long after 21 because immediately everyone made this about 21. So it's been, and I assumed it was just settled because we hadn't heard anything for a very long time. It's like, oh no, but this is actually happening. But Massa, as an ex F1 driver, he's got plenty of money to throw at this. So yeah.
Ooh, that is disturbing. That is such a good observation you made. That's not even funny. Like I think that was just a really. I can't believe no one's talked about this. First of all, why was this date picked? Do we know? Who picked this date?
I
Was
mean,
this just
okay, well, court proceedings, as we know, it takes a very long time before something goes to trial or to court. You need to spend. Well, it depends what it is. I mean, murder trials, it can take years before they go to trial because you have to gather all the evidence and blah, blah, blah. And so something like this, because there's a lot at stake, I'm sure it does take a while. But also, I mean, legal proceedings, everything just takes ages in general. I mean, even during a trial, they're like, oh, there's the slightest disturbance. It's like, okay, well, we're done for the rest of the day. We'll reconvene tomorrow or whatever. It's like, you could reconvene in 10 minutes, but okay. Yeah, they could pick any date. It's just when it's that exact one. I feel like it'd be either that or just before Silverstone is they do it. If that's a sort of signal that, oh, Lewis is going to win it, it's all fine.
Hmm. This is so suspicious. I don't believe in coincidences like this. I really don't. And I think what I think first of all, Lewis has honorary citizenship in Brazil,
Mm.
which is really odd to me.
I don't. It's
Well, why
it's
does he
random
have?
that well because he's really popular. He became really popular, and it's hard to see why. Because they hated it. Like 2009, he was having peanuts thrown at him by spectators in the grandstands and stuff. And then he wins a few races there, and they suddenly love him. Like it is kind of odd.
It just feels like almost like this is all being orchestrated. I'm exaggerating, but it feels like some powers above are orchestrating all of this. Like Lewis gets appeased with citizenship, so he doesn't want to offend Brazil and countersue, and we get Massa his title, gives us something to talk about. He gets the court case in between Mexico and Brazil, so when he wins it, he goes to Brazil and we give him a champion's welcome. Dear, dear Lord, this is really concerning now. This is not just this. I actually think he's going to win it. Like
Hmm.
before this podcast, I actually thought there was a slim chance. Something just hit me when you pointed that out. I actually think something's going to happen. Okay, yeah. So Kimi Raikkonen needs to stop doing whatever he's doing with his kid, whatever you get on the phone with your lawyer immediately. I'm telling you, Kimi, they're coming for that title. And the same with Max if he values 2021. They're coming.
Yeah.
This is disastrous. Okay. So, hmm. What do you think, Peter? What do you think the odds of Massa winning this are now that we've discussed this and we're wrapping this up soon? I mean, what do you think the odds of him winning it are?
More than people thought, but at the same time, the I feel like there would be attempts to not give it to him in the interest of protecting the integrity of the sport. And I imagine the defense team would certainly be arguing, well, this sets a really bad precedent, or financially it's not viable because of the amount of monetary compensation that would need to be dished out to all kinds of different people as well, and the fact that
Right.
you're then punishing the other drivers that would be that had nothing to do with this, and then end up losing results and points because of it.
I think you're right. I just that scheduling date is so odd. It's so odd. And think of the backlash in Brazil when if Massa doesn't get it. It's an odd one for sure. But I'd have to agree with you. There's just so many negatives that would come from this. I think it's better for the FIA to just not make mistakes going forward and try to minimize them than trying to go back and fix all the mistakes that happen. It's part of life. Things happen. You just have to accept the
Mm.
result and move on. At the end of the day, it's just a sporting competition. So I think it would be the end of Formula One as we know it if this went through. But now I'm a bit concerned that this is much more serious than I originally realized. So we'll see what happens. It's still a ways away, so there's quite a few races that I think this is honestly one of the hot topics of this season, aside from Formula One. People want to know what's going on with this
Mm.
case because Peter, if you remember, this was such an emotional championship. We talked about this in an earlier episode. So many people still get so triggered and 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 so emotional about this title for some reason. And they don't even have to be British or Brazilian. It was a season that anyone who watched it never forgot. And
Yeah,
so Massa's got an unnatural amount of sympathy because of what happened in that final race.
yeah, it's weird. It kind of captured everyone like that, and it's like with Massa, he doesn't even give off vibes of a champion. Like his career afterwards is pretty rubbish. Let's be honest.
And before, let's be honest, I mean, he had two good seasons,
Yeah,
2007 and 2008. That was it.
I mean, I'd only just started watching Formula One at that point, so I was like, oh, he seems to be all right. And Hamilton was only in his second season, so we're still ironing out a lot of the creases in his own driving and racecraft and that. But
Okay,
yeah,
let, let me recap for people who think this is a championship caliber driver. In 2002, he was comfortably beaten by Nick Heidfeld, and he was actually fired officially at the end of the season. So what happened was he went to Ferrari for a year, and he was a test driver. If you go watch the 2003 Formula One season, you will not see Felipe Massa on the grid. You know why? He's a test driver. He didn't get a drive. So he was a Ferrari, and he was regularly on Baduer's pace, but not significantly quicker. So then he went to Sauber for 2004. He got destroyed by Giancarlo Fisichella. Fisichella left to Renault, so that was Massa and Villeneuve on Michelin tires for 1 year. Uh, they finished pretty similar to each other in the points, but Massa was quicker than Villeneuve. Villeneuve was really at the end of his career at that point. He was comfortably beaten by Michael after that. Kimi beat him in '07. Massa had his best season in '08. '09, he had the accident. And then after that, he was just a disaster. I think psychologically ruined by his experience with Alonso. This would be the weakest world champion in Formula One history. Let me repeat that. If he wins it, he would be the weakest world champion in the history of this sport. Weaker than Hill, weaker than Hawthorne, weaker than Phil Hill as well, not just Damon, weaker than Jacques Villeneuve. Anyone I'm missing is a weak champion? But
am I allowed to say James Hunt? Um,
yeah, yeah, weaker than
um,
James Hunt. You think Felipe Massa could fight Niki Lauda in a title fight? Are you kidding me? Is that a
didn't
joke?
didn't all of Massa's wins come from leading from the front or from penalties for other people as well, or something?
They did. In fact, they did, didn't they?
There's what was it?
So
Turkey 06. I think Brazil 06. Bahrain
yeah.
'07, Turkey '07. Yeah, he only ever won at Bahrain, Turkey. He was one of the crap races were the ones he always won.
Yeah. Oh, there was nothing more boring than a dominant Felipe Massa victory. That's
Mm.
how you know you're almost about to fall asleep.
Bahrain 2008, he won from second, so that's something
Well
because
done.
Kubica had pole. Um,
He only ever won from first or second. He never won from below the front row. And
Even Vettel won from third. You know.
yeah, I mean, and yeah, here you go. Yeah, Seb won from third,
You
and
know, 20th to second, Germany 2019.
yeah, when has Massa ever gone from 20th to second? Never.
Mm.
So Vettel's a much better driver than Massa is. There's no doubt about that in my view. I know some Vettel has his detractors, but I'm not going to insult Vettel here. Compared to Massa, he's a much stronger driver.
Mm.
And look, I don't want to like insult Massa too much. I mean, Massa has talent. He was certainly a very talented qualifier, and um, yeah, he was a good F1 driver, but he wasn't a great F1 driver. And this would be the biggest joke ever if he won this case. And we just again, I want to finish off by saying sometimes you need to make a decision for the greater interest and acknowledge that perhaps it's not a perfect decision, but it's the best decision given the circumstances and the consequences. And for
Mm.
the sake of sport and the sake of Formula One, I really hope we don't open this Pandora's box because it would be so much worse than just one result, Peter. It would be
Mm.
countless financial penalties, countless lawsuits about countless little events that have happened in Formula One history, and it would be never ending. It would be never ending. You will never know if the result you've attained can be yours. And what kind of a sport would that be? Be a joke.
Yeah. Mm. I mean, yeah. Well, we've got there's still several months to go, so there's a lot to contemplate. Everyone's going to forget about this, but then come the tail end of the season, it might prove very entertaining drama and lots of speculation. Yeah, if any of our audience have any thoughts on it, let us know in the comments below. You've been listening to the DRS Train podcast. We're on YouTube and Spotify, and you can find us on Instagram and X at the DRS Train podcast. Make sure to tune in for our next episode. Stay safe, and we'll see you all next time.